I am Dr. Tom Schell with Newville Research. I am actually in our lab right now, and I am compounding a product called EQ Plus, which a lot of our customers utilize. Very, very popular formula. First things first, all of our formulas are handmade, as demonstrated. So I'm in my lab, and I spend a lot of time here making up formulas and producing, making formulas, special formulas for various horse owners. So while I'm in the lab, I'm going to keep working here, but I tend to do a lot of thinking. Thinking about emails, thinking about Facebook and posts and messages that are received. So I just thought that I'd ask my wife to come into the lab here with the camera and let me just bounce some things off of my head while I'm working. So with that being said, the first thing is, here recently I had put out an article regarding not feeding grains to the horse, which has received a lot of attention, as I knew that it would, because it challenges a lot of conceptions and perceptions that we believe to be true and that apply to our horses and every horse. And the reality is that it's not true. Not the article, but our perceptions. And so when you put out an article such as that, which I do believe to be true, based on our experiences, it challenges what others believe to be true, and thus it creates a lot of discussion and sometimes arguments, and sometimes some people can get downright hostile, which is perfectly fine because it's just challenging what they believe to be truth and reality. And the fact is, as I'm working here, the fact is that grains are not bad for the horse. And I think that I make that clear in that article, at least I hope that I did. It's the application of grains. And as I've stated over and over again in several articles, I've been a veterinarian for 24 years. And in the first decade of my career here, working on horses, we did not have fancy feeds. We did not have pelletized feeds. We did not have senior feeds. The first feeds that actually started to come about were probably in the first 10 years of my being in practice. And those were targeting foals and with calcium phosphorus ratios and epiphysitis and things along those lines. And then over time, we started to then come out with senior feeds, metabolic feeds, this, and this. From a veterinarian's perspective, my perspective, in practice, those feeds created more problems for my patients than what they did resolving them. Our caseload went up dramatically, which is good for me, I guess, as a vet, because it pays the bills, but it's not good for you as an owner. And those feeds have just continued to grow in numbers, trying to fill every little need you can possibly have, from a metabolic horse to cooling a horse down to increasing the heat and the stamina and the energy of a horse. And they're trying to fulfill needs that they are not fulfilling, and they're creating more problems than what they are helping. How do I know this? Because I am in communication with horse owners every day. And if these feeds were solving your problems, you would not be contacting your veterinarian for various issues. You would not be reaching out to individuals like myself looking for help and guidance, although that's what we're here for. But the bottom line point is what we're feeding these horses is not working for us. Going further and looking at the microbiome of the horse, and this is something we've looked at for about 5 years now, and that was based off of some research in the 1980s, I believe, noting that in metabolic horses they tended to have a higher fecal culture load of streptococcus, certain species of streptococcus, which is lactic acid bacteria. And they were noting that that was present in the metabolic horses versus the non-metabolic horses. So that data was back in the 80s, I believe. I cannot remember off the top of my head who the author was, or the researcher, it doesn't matter. But that's what we expanded off of and started looking at lactic acid counts in these horses and using that as an indicator, kind of like a canary in a coal mine. And surprisingly, this researcher from the 80s was correct. The metabolic horses do have a higher load of lactic acid bacteria in their feces than what a non-metabolic horse does. But this extends beyond the metabolic horse. And we see this same load of bacteria or imbalance, dysbiosis, whatever you want to refer to it as. We note it in racehorses, barrel racehorses, note it in cases of EIPH or bleeding. We note it in cases of PSSM. We note it in cases of EPM. It goes on and on and on. So, the question is, oh Lord, did these horses contract an infection? No, they didn't contract an infection. Something is altering the bacterial load and shifting the composition in their gut, allowing the lactic acid bacteria to take over and suppressing the others. And with that being said, the ultimate question is, well, what's doing that? What is doing that? And the first thing we have to do then is to look at human research and say, well, what influences that microbiome? And there's two prominent things in human research: diet and the impact of stress. Mental or physical, because the brain and the gut are connected. Influence the brain, you influence the gut. You alter the gut, you will also alter mental pathways. Hence the connection between microbiome and anxiety, microbiome and depression, microbiome and Alzheimer's, other cognitive issues. They are interconnected. Again, we don't want to accept this, but it is reality. So, getting back to grains, the majority of horses that we see here have got a dysbiosis. We culture them when they come in, whether if they're coming off the racetrack or they're a rehab horse from somewhere else. We culture them because I want to know. Half the time I can tell you what that horse is going to culture with just by opening up the Ziploc bag that the owners will submit the poop in, or I can see it in the horse when they poop on the floor or poop in a stall. You look at enough poop, you can tell whether if there's a dysbiosis there just by color, mucus coating to it, smell, things along those lines. But I will still culture these guys to know where we're at. And then the first thing that usually goes is grain. And again, grain is not a bad thing here. The question is whether if the horse is capable of handling it. And most of those horses are so messed up in the GI tract that they cannot handle the grain. So, just like hitting your thumb with a hammer, I cannot cushion the thumb enough to keep taking a repetitive blow from a hammer. So I remove the grain. Is that a big no-no? Shouldn't we do that? Nope, we should, because the horse is actually improved. It's one of the first things that goes. However, you have to remember that that grain in those situations is just a contributor to the problem. Resolving it will reduce the damage to the GI tract, will reduce the stress to the GI tract, but in a lot of cases we need external help to further promote healing in that GI tract, to promote balance. And this is where proper diet comes in, proper use of herbs, things along those lines. Now, the average owner will sit there and say, but I've got a hard keeper and I need to have this grain in order to maintain weight. Well, grain is extremely high in carbohydrates. Now, of course, there is some protein to it, there are some fats to it, but it's very, very high in carbohydrates. Otherwise, we wouldn't be coming out with these low-starch grains. You're not going to take an anorexic person or a person who's recovered from cancer and has lost a tremendous amount of weight through chemo or radiation and expecting a weight on them with oats. You're just not going to do that. Although oats are beneficial for humans, and in research, you don't eat a ton of them. A small amount goes a very, very long way. So in the horse world, we are relying on grains, such as oats, to provide energy and stamina in that horse, and we are often feeding them in extremely high amounts. Look at the average racehorse on the track, and they're being fed grains in the amount of anywhere between 6 to 12 quarts per day, depending on the trainer or the owner, and what their perceptions are. So you are feeding a tremendous amount of carbs, thinking that the horse needs those carbs to fuel energy, and the reality is they don't. Not only should that body be storing glucose in the form of glucagon in the liver to be used as an energy source as needed on demand, but there are other pathways in the body that help to fuel energy. Things like usage of fats, and then also we get into the whole concept of ketones. So, hopefully as you can see, we should not be relying on grains to put weight onto a horse. There is much, much better ways to do that. Usage of fats is one alternative, although not in huge amounts. The other thing is to use proper sources of carbs, which we refer to in Chinese medicine as yin tonics, which actually supply carbs with various phytochemicals that are present in the plants and will help to add moisture and weight to the body. So, many options outside of grain. Now, getting to the performance horse and saying that we need those grains for energy. Hopefully I just covered that. The answer is, and the bottom line is that we don't. And although there are some out there that say that we absolutely need these, what I have to then say to you is, at what cost? At what cost? So right now in the world of horse racing, we have got 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds that have got uncontrolled EIPH or bleeding. We have tendons that are breaking left and right. We have horrendous feet. We have got myopathies going on. Gastric ulcers to the point to where we are pumping ulcer medication to these horses like it's a Pez candy. And not to mention other hosts of problems, including immune response, influenza outbreaks, herpes outbreaks, things along those lines. So you have to sit there and say, so we're giving all these grains to improve energy at what expense? Well, that's what we're giving it to these horses, and those are the expenses that we're dealing with. And that can hold true for the average jumper or the average dressage horse as well. Especially if you add stress into the equation with a horse that is being stalled 23, 22 hours out of the day. That's like putting a dog into a small crate 24 hours a day. You will develop problems, health-wise, stress-wise. So you throw the grains in, you mess up the microbiome due to the diet and the stress load, and boom, you will start to develop problems. That may show up as a joint issue, it may show up as a back issue, pelvis, SI, hock, neck. It could show up as allergies. It can show up as EPM, PSSM. It can show up as, influenza. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then we continue to look at all these horses that have lamenesses associated with the feet. And we are putting shoes on them and pads and pumping silicone in to try to cushion the feet. When in reality, although the horse may be improved and sounder with those devices on its feet, you haven't fixed anything. And the reality is that that problem is still brewing underneath those pads. And the average horse, if you pull shoes off, cannot walk on hard concrete and cannot even think about walking on gravel. And that's pretty sad when you think about it. And this all gets back to the microbiome, the inflammatory response, and how it's impacting the rest of the body. Then you open up the door for insulin resistance and metabolic problems. And that list just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the overall goal here is just to convey to you guys, as owners, the grains may not be the solution. And the most important part is to try to understand why they may or may not be the solution. And even in removing them, some horses do improve, because as I said, you remove the culprit or a contributor to the GI problems. But in a lot of other horses, it's not so much that the problem is present still, but the damage is there, and it's still reflective in the very, very low inflammatory response in that horse. So even with all of the rehab horses that we have here, even though we've altered grain, they still benefit from our approach to maintain and help to promote balance in the GI tract. If we pull that away from them, they will rebound and go back. So the point there is that either A, there's an inherent stress response in that horse, personality-wise, something, a learned behavior, or otherwise, something's continuing to contribute to the GI tract. From my perspective, diet-wise, we're covering everything that we can. So if we add in specific herbs to the blends to alter the GI tract, to encourage healing, to reduce inflammation there, to promote a more balanced microbiome, horses do much better. And it's actually fairly low cost when you look at the grand scheme of things. Because with all the horses that we've had come and go here, in all honesty, with rehab, there's very, very little going out of the owner's pocket in terms of veterinary care. Most of the time I'm not even involved, other than setting up a regimen for that horse, maintaining feet, things along those lines. And the horses that are maintained and do extremely well each day by the owners or by ourselves here, their ongoing veterinary care is zero, aside from something like vaccinations, routine deworming, and Coggins tests. You don't have lameness issues, you don't have foot problems, you don't have the ongoing joint problems where you're injecting joints. So this all feeds back to the microbiome in the GI tract and how you manage it and how you control it. And if you look into it hard enough, you will find that this also applies to you, me, and the next person. All of our health issues are connected back into our microbiome, what we are eating and what we are doing and the stress present within. So I hope that that explains a little bit more of the article, just some thoughts off of my head, and hopefully I will work on a part 2 that will get into the performance horses, in terms of articles, performance horses, and the harder keepers, and options for you to manage these guys. So I hope this helps.